Hey guys and girls, and welcome back to the #1 channel on Channel Niche. Now before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, and if you enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe to be part of the Daily Hit family. Don't forget to stay until the end of the video to see the tips to evict a tenant. Now let's get back to the video. No one wants to evict a tenant, but sometimes it's the only option. Evicting a tenant can be a long and difficult process, but if you follow these 5 tips, it will go a lot smoother. These 5 tips will help you evict a tenant without any drama or hassle. 5 tips to evict a tenant. It doesn't mean you're free of terrible tenants if you're a fantastic landlord. Screening tenants at the beginning of any lease is a good way to migrate future risk, but it still doesn't account for the unpredictability of some of them. Even if you're an excellent landlord, you'll almost certainly have to go through the eviction procedure at least once in your life. Whether a tenant is disrupting other tenants, can't afford the rent, or is damaging your rental property, it's vital to understand the legalities behind lease termination and evicting a tenant to avoid future hassle. 1. When's it legal to evict a tenant? Before you start evicting a tenant, as a landlord, you must first understand when it is legal to evict a tenant. You must have a good cause for eviction, which usually boils down to the following reasons and must be proved during your eviction case. Failure to pay rent, violation of lease agreement, illegal usage, subletting, pets, etc., health or safety hazards caused by the tenant, damage to the rental property or premises. If you detect any of these problems in your renter, the next step will be to provide him or her with a termination notice. Termination notices order the tenant to do one of the following things: pay rent or quit, cure or quit, unconditional quit. If you discover that the tenant continues to stay in the rental home after receiving one of these notices, the next stage is to begin an eviction lawsuit. What to know before starting the tenant eviction process? Even if it may appear to be harsh, eviction is in the business of rental housing, and every landlord should be familiar with the ins and outs. In some situations, it's as simple as asking the tenant to leave. In more serious cases, the formal eviction procedure will be required. When it comes to the legal eviction process, there are a few things every landlord should understand. Get lease agreement terms in writing. If you're planning on evicting a tenant from your rental property lawfully, the first step is giving that person a written eviction notice and a deadline. State specific tenant eviction laws. The rules in various states are different. It's crucial to be aware of and think about when writing leases, and you should research the laws thoroughly to ensure that you can successfully defend your eviction case. The Landlord and Tenant Act. This legislation is a step-by-step guide to the legalities of the eviction procedure. Filing a tenant eviction with a court. Go to the local courthouse to file your eviction and pay a fee. The clerk will schedule your hearing and notify your tenant with a summons. Remember, eviction is the court-approved physical removal of a tenant from his or her home via the assistance of a law enforcement officer. So despite how angry you may be with your tenant, you can't just throw them out onto the street. 3. Stick to what the law allows. The landlord cannot physically remove the tenant from the property, remove the tenant's personal property, change the locks or lock out the tenant, shut off the utilities, or harass the tenant. Trying to remove a tenant yourself can cause a lot of trouble, and it's also against the law. If things go well in court and you as a landlord win, your tenant will be given a certain amount of time to move out, typically anywhere from 48 hours to 7 days, depending on the state. When your tenant does not leave the property on time, you have the right to have the police officer escort them out and store their belongings outside. Despite the fact that this is not something people want, it does occur. 4. What's next after evicting a tenant? You may proceed with demanding past due rent if your tenant refuses to pay. A small claims action is allowed in small claims court. This places the decision into the hands of the judge. You can sue for any back due rent under this procedure. If a court decides that the tenant owes you money for past due rent, you may get your money one of three ways: by having their wages garnished, their tax refund garnished, or use a private debt collector. 5. How to protect yourself as a landlord in the future. If you've gone through the eviction procedure, you know how expensive, time-consuming, and stressful it can be for both sides. Here are a few things that you can do to help safeguard yourself as a landlord so that you don't have to go through the eviction procedure again in the future. Conduct tenant interviews, tenant screenings, gather all the information you can about your future tenant. Run tenant credit reports. Find out if the applicant has a decent idea of their personal financial position and whether or not they'll be reliable in paying rent. Background and eviction checks. Make certain you're renting your house to someone who hasn't been charged with a crime or had difficulties in the past. Landlords and property managers often dread the process of evicting a tenant. It can be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. However, with the right tips and advice, you can make the process as smooth and stress-free as possible. In this video, we've outlined 5 essential steps to evicting a tenant. Follow these tips and you'll be on your way to regaining control of your property in no time. If you liked this video or did not like it, please let us know why in the comments below. And lastly, if you want us to make a specific video on anything real estate related, let us know in the comments below. And I'll see you next time on the Daily Hit. Bye!